For this evening, so should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors to the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of this meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted and recorded and will be audio streamed via the Council's website. The Westgate garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset and members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. Rachel, could we have any apologies, please?
Yes, we have apologies for absence from Councillor Edwards.
And substitutes?
We have Councillor N. Smith for Councillor Edwards this evening.
Thank you. Ask now for declarations, Rachel, of any interests received in advance and of the generic declaration, please, to be read on behalf of all the members.
We have no declarations of interest received on advance specifically for this meeting, and I'll now read the generic announcement. All or some councillors may have received correspondence from or spoken with applicants, agents, supporters or objectors, and some of the public speakers may also be known to members of the committee due to their work as councillors. Neither circumstance prevents councillors from participating in the meeting. However, any councillor who considers that they do not have an open mind in respect of any item in the agenda should not participate in the meeting when the relevant item is to be discussed.
Councillor Stockley, I believe.
Sorry, Chair, just to roll back a little bit. On the announcement for fire safety, you mentioned that the muster point is Café des Amis, which I understand is the other side of the river. I'm wondering if anyone leaves from the door behind us, how are they going to get through after dusk? Because it will be locked. Thank you.
I believe the gate is locked after dusk, so the exit would be via the glass doors at the side here. Is that correct? Oh, this fire, and I, as the officers just said, the fire door to my right, on your side, is actually
just
accessible.
Maybe being a bit anal about this, but it's just that if this is a fire door and our muster point is the other side of the river and the gates are locked, we will have a problem, because that's the door that's being pointed out as an exit. Are you with me?
I am indeed with you, actually. It makes very good sense. Just clarify matters. Thank you, Councillor Stockley.
I'm just checking the emergency exit routine. Okay, so we do state to leave via the nearest available emergency exit, and two of the closest exits are the glass door behind you to the left. So that's this door here, and through the double doors. So we take your point about the double doors behind us, and we'll take that back for this piece, and also consider the emergency exit to the right here behind you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockley. Very relevant point. Thank you. Public participation. Can I confirm there's one public speaker tonight? Will be heard after the officer's presentation on the relevant item. Okay. To move on to the minutes held on the 25th of July 2023. Can I ask Kath Wallen to mention a slight variation on this one, and then after her perhaps to confirm following that statement.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there's been a few emails regarding the speakers listed in last month's meeting. You'll know that the Constitution records the criteria for speakers allowed at Planning Committee. What the minutes do, they record what slots that the speakers have registered at. So hopefully there's no misunderstanding. These people all registered in those particular slots. Thank you.
And with that statement, could I have this confirmed by general assent? Thank you. Moving on to the first substantive item of the evening. This is the application for the land to the rear of 51 Rough Common Road, Rough Common. And if I could ask the Planning Officer, Andrew Gambrill, to introduce his report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Many of you will recall that this application was reported to committee a couple of months ago now, in July. What I'll do is I'll do a brief kind of overview of the scheme, and then I'll kind of forward on to the viability and the energy strategy queries that were brought up last time and resulted in the deferral. So if I start just by introducing the scheme, so this is an outline application for up to 23 dwellings at 51 Rough Common Road, with some alterations to the existing property, 51 Rough Common Road. In the red there, you can see the outline, so it kind of entails the former nursery buildings and the existing 51 Rough Common Road together with a kind of landscaping / meadow. Here in yellow, what you can see is the currently allocated site. So this site is allocated to 28 dwellings within the current local plan. You'll note that the scheme itself is for 23, and that's as a result of the Stod Marsh mitigation and the need to reduce the numbers in order to achieve neutrality. Here you can see an indicative layout. So the site itself kind of comprising a mix of detached and semi-detached properties within the site, together with kind of visitor parking bays to replace those lost on the existing Rough Common Road. And here you can see kind of that other half of the site, kind of where the drainage infrastructure is proposed to be. So kind of the SUDS infrastructure in that bottom corner, and then in a very faint line where the cursor is, where the biological nutrient reactor is to be located underground. Here you can see the access into the site, which is recommended to be approved in full. So this is showing those 4 parking bays along here, replacing those 3 that are lost on the main Rough Common Road. Here you can see the parameter plan for the site. So where the orange patches are, you've got the dark and the lighter. That's where the residential 23 dwellings would be, with the lighter orange being up to 2.5 storey and the darker orange being 2 storey. And the green areas are fairly self-explanatory. They entail the kind of the open space and the SUDS area. Here you can see a photo of the site. So that house there is 51 Rough Common Road. You can see the parking bays that are referred to on Rough Common Road as well. And that's where the main access would punch through to serve the site. Here you can just see where there's kind of essentially where pedestrian and cycle links to go between 43 and 45 Rough Common Road. And that's what kind of is the situation on site at the moment. So you've got various kind of storage buildings related to the previous nursery use of the site, together with kind of outside storage as well and hard standing. This is taken from a slightly different angle. So this is from the prowl that runs from Lovell Road to the south, well, to the west of the site, southwest of the site, just showing the view up. So you can kind of see in the distance, you can kind of see a house along Highfield Close there, and the houses would be read in that context. And this is just a view showing down where the drainage infrastructure would be and kind of some of the paraphernalia associated with the adjacent potential kind of keeping of horses. So I've given that overview. two of the things that we were discussed at the last committee, in which I'm seeking obviously to address through this deferred presentation, is around the energy strategy and the viability of the scheme. So the energy strategy, having spoken with the applicant, they obviously heard what the committee was saying at the last presentation, and they themselves are very keen to kind of ensure that the development that comes forward is highly energy efficient. So with kind of a reduced kind of reliance on any kind of gas-powered heating, etc. So what we've done is we've changed the condition 17 so that it refers specifically to the use of air source heat pumps and solar panels for each dwelling, together with EV charging points as well, which, although a strategy will be submitted at a later date, this will drive kind of the enhanced energy performance of the site. And on the viability point, members last time queried obviously the kind of the lack of the affordable housing kind of contributions from the development, and asked us to investigate essentially the viability to establish whether or not we could actually achieve any off-site affordable housing contributions. The previous viability assessment was carried out in February, and kind of the UK economy, the landscape's changed quite significantly with interest rates increasing and house prices being a lot more volatile than they were. So what we've done is we've gone away, we've had the viability of the scheme independently reviewed on the basis of the 23 dwellings. And because of the increased finance costs related to kind of securing loans against construction, and also largely due to the volatility in house prices, together with the Stodmarsh mitigation and the circa £385,000 contribution towards SIL, even with the developer taking on more risk and reducing the profit level from the site, the scheme still remains unviable, so it still cannot achieve any contributions towards off-site affordable housing. But what we're looking to do, obviously obviously you may have heard about the national kind of strategic solution they were looking at for nutrient neutrality. So issues such as Stodmarsh that kind of the House of Lords didn't particularly like last week. And then you've also got kind of the local strategic option that we're looking at too. What we're looking at doing in this specific circumstance is introducing a review mechanism for the viability, so that if in future a local scheme were to come forward or a national scheme were to come forward, if the developer would essentially tap into that scheme as an alternative, and then we would revisit the viability at that stage to establish whether or not any off-site affordable housing contributions can be made. So on that basis, and for the reasons set out in the report and in this presentation, the application is recommended for grant, subject to conditions and legal agreement. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I gather there is one public speaker on this. So, Rachel, if you could.
Yes, we have one public speaker when you're ready to invite them to speak.
If you could do, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. As before, I'm here to represent the applicant, SME house builder located in the district, and we employ over 100 local people. We are working on behalf of the landowners to secure planning permission and bring forward delivery of high-quality, energy-efficient homes that be an asset to Rough Common and the district. When the committee last met, I set out the wide-ranging benefits of the proposal, which relates to a part brownfield site that has been allocated to provide much-needed housing in successive local plans. Since the committee meeting, we have seen that the complex issues surrounding nutrient neutrality remain in place and are likely to remain in place for a long time and require primary legislation from government to resolve these issues. We'd hoped, and I'm sure the council also hoped, that the issue could have been resolved through the amendments to the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. However, that wasn't the case last week. As set out by your officers, the cost of achieving nutrient neutrality are really significant, and when combined with SIL and the reduction in housing numbers on the site from 28 to 23, it's been demonstrated through robustly tested, independently reviewed financial expert consultant work that the scheme can't deliver affordable housing on site. At the last committee, I know members discussed policy HD2, and as discussed, HD2 requires that developments provide for 30% on-site affordable housing, subject to review and viability work to justify any variation from this requirement. This review has been undertaken and reviewed since committee, and therefore the proposal fully is in compliance with this policy. Whilst Policy HT2 does not require a Section 106 review mechanism, we strongly support affordable housing delivery and have an excellent record of delivering affordable homes to meet policy requirements, particularly in Canterbury District. We therefore support the officer's recommendation that provides for review of affordable housing should an alternative, cheaper or strategic nutrient neutrality solution come forward in the district in the near future, or hopefully such requirements fall away. Councillors were clear at the last meeting they are seeking new homes to be of the highest environmental performance. We fully support this requirement and the updated conditions suggested by officers, and we've recently achieved Energy Performance A rating on our homes that are under construction in Sellindge near Folkestone. And we think that we're the first SME developer to bring forward a site with that level of energy efficiency, which has air source heat pumps, EV charging for every property, solar panels on the roof, and a huge amount of biodiversity net gain as well. And again, alongside a high level of energy efficiency and quality design and finish, we also support the requirement for biodiversity net gain and actively seek to deliver enhancements to nature in our developments. We welcome anyone to come and visit our site in Sellindge to see what we're doing. Thank you for your time. We hope you can support the officer recommendation in this second report and approve the application on an allocated site in order to progress the delivery of 23 much needed new homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I now open this item up to the floor for discussion? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair. I welcome the modifications and amendments that have been made to this plan. I am still concerned about the lack of affordability, and I understand the reasons being given. On page 23, paragraph 31, I would like if at all possible, the addition of the word all housing delivered on the site, meaning that as it's written at the moment, as soon as construction starts on a house, then it's locked. We are then stuck with a possible solution found nationally, but then because we've granted and a house has been delivered, then we are stuck with what we've got. Whereas I'm concerned about the remainder of this site, which is currently very well used for the mitigations of Stodmarsh. But what concerns me is if a solution is found through government or wherever, then this then becomes potentially building land. And we end up with a lot of houses, 23, with no affordable housing, basically, and another building site which is open to be developed. Does that make sense?
Andrew, would you like to answer that?
I'm happy to come back. Can I just clarify what it was you were asking about? Because I'm looking at, is it paragraph 31 of the original report?
It's 31 on the paper report. It reads, the Council, neighbouring authorities, Natural England is continuing to a catchment-wide solution. Should planning permission be granted, the solution be found before, and then it says housing is developed. I would like all housing is developed, substituted to make sure that this is a final solution and not, you start building houses, we find a solution, and then we end up with no further social or affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's what concerns me.
You're right. I mean, it's not an issue to kind of update the report and refer to the all. The intention was before any of the development commences, if that strategy comes into play, then we would review the viability at that point.
Sorry, Chair. Presumably this is going to take a matter of some months to develop this site. So a lot can change, as we've seen in the last few months, since July to now. So policy changes, etc. What concerns me is if we have a hard line that once housing is delivered, then we are stuck with what we've got on this report. Whereas if we change that to all housing, then until it's finished, everything is open for acquiring affordable housing or whatever. You see what I'm trying to say?
I do, yeah. I think the difficulty is obviously in order for the developer to proceed with a development, they need to obviously establish the kind of viability point prior to any development being carried out. So this is why we're looking to secure that viability review prior to anything being carried out, rather than halfway through the development, because it then challenges how that scheme would be funded and built out.
Yeah, I understand there will be problems because obviously the construction of the bionutrient removal equipment will need to be in place before people start living there.
Yeah.
So it's just that if we had a clause halfway through the development and we have a reassess whether or not the site is still potentially viable for or not viable for social housing or affordable housing, just a break in the middle of the construction to say, yes, okay, nothing's changed, everything remains the same. I'm probably hoping for something that's not available, but I'm very concerned that we will end up with houses, the law will change, we don't longer need this very expensive mitigation, and then we've got these houses standing as they are with a nice road running into another section which can be then developed further. And then it's a small site and whoa, again, we can't afford to put any affordable housing because it's, it's the way it works. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, like you just touched on it there, the difficulties, obviously, the mitigation has to be in place kind of prior to the first dwelling. So when they go ahead and they purchase the biological nutrient reactor, for instance, that has to be installed prior to that first dwelling. So it's not a case of you build, say, for instance, 11 or 12 houses on this site, and then you could step back from that. That the viability challenges up front is something they've got to put in initially to enable the development to come forward. So it's we've done it before on schemes for 500 houses where you've introduced these kind of interim viability review mechanisms, because actually in a 500 dwelling scheme you can phase it in such a way which enables you to provide infrastructure on different phases, whereas we've tested it obviously twice now, the viability on this particular scheme, and it's still the case that it isn't coming out as viable. And this is why we're doing what we can, and kind of by working with the applicant, we're trying to secure, or we are securing, the viability review mechanism prior to any dwelling being occupied, because that's the stage at which, to be honest, on a scheme of this size, that's what we can achieve. It's not ordinarily that we would introduce a review mechanism for a scheme of this size, but because of the nature of kind of the Stodmarsh issues and the need to embed that mitigation before the first dwelling, that's the challenge we've got.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Stockley?
I'm conscious of the fact I'm rambling on. One further point, that is page 17, Harbledown, Rough Common Parish, condition requiring the last section to prevent it from being built on. Obviously, this is a concern that has been raised by the parish council as well. So, it just, I'm a cynical old what's it, and I can just see that in a few years' time we'll be back here talking about another development. So I think it's just worth flagging up. I do understand what's being said, and thank you for your time.
I think I know the area you're obviously the open space area, just to the south of the development parcel. That's required for the Stodmarsh mitigation, so it has to be provided as a wildflower meadow, and we'd be securing that via legal agreement as well. So it's not something that they could, develop on. If they needed the Stodmarsh mitigation, then they're going to have to, obviously have to sign up to the legal agreement there. It's also necessary not only for the Stodmarsh mitigation, but in part also necessary for reptile mitigation as well, because there are slow worms and something else on the site. I can't remember now. There are slow worms, and it will come to me. It's needed for that translocation as well. So it's twofold. There's an issue, and then obviously each case is considered its own merits, but there was also an appeal that the applicant was unsuccessful on for developing that area as well. So you've got a threefold protection there, really embedded within this application.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. I don't think Councillor Stockley's query has actually been answered, despite, I take all that the officer is saying. It's just in the wording of that report, because it says, should a solution be found before housing is delivered? Which means that anything after that is null and void. Yeah, and that's our concern, I think, is that all that comes after that statement is invalid. It doesn't come into effect. The answer might be to say, to delete, should a solution be found, and delete before housing is delivered on the site, because then it leaves it open for those mitigations to actually come about at whatever time the solution is found.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, policy HG2 does consider scenarios like this where affordable housing cannot be provided because of the viability of a development. And there is no requirement as part of that policy to introduce a review mechanism in any development where we approve schemes without affordable housing. But because of the specific circumstances around this site, particularly around the costs of mitigating Stodmarsh and the potential for either a national or local solution coming forward, we felt it was appropriate in this case to introduce that review mechanism, because it is disappointing that affordable housing isn't being provided as part of this site. But at least this gives the opportunity, when building starts on the site, to be able to review the financial position of the development, review what any changes in the market. The problem that we have in reviewing the viability of a scheme through building, through part delivery, is the fact that if a national or local solution doesn't come forward and the on-site mitigation has to be provided, that will be provided at some point during the build. It has to be provided, but I can't remember which condition it is, but there is a condition that we're recommending on the permission that mitigation has to be provided before first occupation. So it's likely that it won't be provided up front, because obviously because of the costs, but it will be needed to be provided at some point during the build, at which point occupation is, all the housing has been provided, occupation is possible. It has to be in place and operational at that point in time in order to meet the requirements of that condition. So from a practical point of view, it will be difficult to require a review during building, but we've acknowledged that there are specific circumstances in this case, and it does present an opportunity before actual spades in the ground, we can review the viability position. And if it does shift, or if the position around Stodmarsh shifts, then we'll be able at that time to perhaps claw back some financial contributions towards affordable housing to be provided in the district. Perhaps that's answered your question, perhaps not.
Thank you, Stevie. Thank you, Chair. That's a lot clearer. And I think we were getting confused with the wording that's actually in the report. Now, from what the way you've explained it now, that's much more clear. We can see a sort of a pattern, a path where we can actually come back to the situation and say there are things that we can find a solution to later down the road. And the way it reads at the moment, it doesn't say that. But what you've said, and if we take what you said as going to be a part of the paperwork that's going to go behind this planning, the permission, then that's fine. It may be we were getting a bit semantics, maybe, but until you clarified it that way, I think we were going on what was on the wording in the report.
I take it you're contented with that answer then, Councillor Mellish? Okay. Sorry.
Hi, thank you. This is an SME development. It's a smaller development. Will the affordable housing, given the current conditions, always fail to deliver affordable housing? If it's a similar size of development, because is that what we're stuck with? Really, is what I'm asking.
Essentially, it's the unique circumstances of this site. So the 23, coupled with the fact that they have to deliver their own solution, to Stodmarsh and the Stodmarsh issue. So having to introduce kind of specialist equipment in order to deal with the issue and to kind of essentially create a nutrient neutral development, whereas other schemes don't often find themselves, to be honest, in this scenario, so they're able to deliver that 30% on site or an off-site contribution if a registered provider doesn't want to take it on. It's just simply because in this case it's caught by the Stodmarsh issues and it needs to address the Stodmarsh issues via its own mitigation package, which is what just tipped it over into the unviability, unfortunately.
Sorry, just wanted to come back if I could. So that would mean that any development that was proposed within that, where the Stodmarsh is an issue, it would apply, wouldn't it?
It would depend on the size of the scheme, essentially, because you could find, I used an example of 500, and it's obviously a drastically different scheme, but obviously a 500 dwelling scheme, they're selling so many more houses, the viability is not challenged in the same way as a small kind of 23 dwelling scheme. And that's the difference, essentially, between this case and others within the wider Stodmarsh catchment.
I believe Councillor Bothwell.
Firstly, like Councillor Stockley, I'm still very disappointed that the viability calculation suggests that there's insufficient profit to enable any affordable housing to be provided. Just to say that this is extremely regrettable, as others have said. Secondly, I do welcome the improvement in energy standards, the emission of gas boilers and their replacement with heat pumps, and the installation of solar panels, etc. However, this development proposal still does not meet the standards required such that we are able to reach net zero in time. An energy performance certificate rating of A is not good enough. This rating can be achieved by installing solar panels, offsetting by the offsetting effect, rather than improving the form and fabric of the building itself, which is far more important. If built to EPC A standards, these houses will still require retrofitting in a very short number of years in order to reach true zero carbon standards. The energy standard for the new houses should be passive house or equivalent, i.e. zero carbon. One of the two reasons that this proposal was deferred at the last planning committee was to allow the applicant to review the energy strategy. However, it appears that this has not been done, and merely that assurances have been made regarding the EPC rating, solar panels, etc. I believe that commitments to achieve true net zero carbon should be embodied in the documents submitted as part of the planning application, rather than imposed as conditions. In that way, this planning committee will have a greater scrutiny of the standards being upheld. If imposed as conditions, there is the possibility that standards will be compromised, i.e. watered down, at some stage during the development process. The City Council and the Government have declared a climate emergency. The clue to the seriousness of the situation is in the name, emergency. So what we should be doing is moving fast towards addressing that emergency. We've seen what's happening around the world. The former chairman of the government's statutory climate change committee, John Gummer, also known as Lord Deben, has said that no planning applications should be approved unless they achieve zero carbon standards, in order that we can meet the UK's zero carbon carbon targets. So building new houses that don't meet those standards will not put us on a track to achieving zero carbon. For these reasons, I cannot support this application. Our futures, and more importantly, the futures of our children and grandchildren, depend on us reaching zero carbon as fast as possible. Unless we act now to achieve that zero carbon future, we will never get there. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, one of the challenges, obviously, with this particular scheme is that it's an outline application. So the detailed elements of the scheme, the appearance, the scale, etc., they come at a later stage, which is in part why we've gone down this condition route for an energy strategy, because what we're looking at doing is essentially, as kind of technology advances and things, it provides us that opportunity down the line to not only obviously provide what the conditions seeking to provide, which is the air source heat pumps and the panels, but also provide any improvements that we can later on down the line when we've got the detailed design in place. The current local plan policy is fairly dated in the sense that it essentially requires development to be building regs compliant in terms of energy efficiencies and explore the options of improvement. And what the applicant in this case is obviously seeking to do is provide far in excess of what is required by policy. So in policy terms, actually kind of what we're securing via this conditioned energy strategy is in accordance with the local plan and is exceeding kind of in many ways what the local plan, current local plan that is, currently asks for. So that's where we're at the moment. We've worked, I've kind of liaised obviously with the applicant following the committee's previous comments around air source heat pumps in particular to ensure that we secure that. And that's, at the moment, that's kind of essentially a betterment on what we had before when it last came to committee, and what we're seeking obviously to approve the application in part on the basis of.
Yes.
Yes, I acknowledge that the local plan, the current local plan doesn't require these standards, but since the current local plan was approved, this council has declared a climate emergency, and we are seeing increasing evidence of the impacts of climate change. So I think it's imperative that we move for our own survival to move to zero carbon buildings immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to come in and say that this is a really useful, positive conversation to be having, and we're certainly looking to improve the standards as part of our new local plan, and I think that's a really important mechanism for us to do that. And in a way, it's useful that this application is in an outline form, because in actual fact, as Andrew said, we'll be approving the detail, and that includes the energy strategy at a later date, by which time there'll be more movement on our local plan. There may be more movement on government policy, which we can actually give more weight to when we're looking at an energy statement that's submitted at the time that it needs to be approved. But as Andrew quite rightly said, we've got the local plan policy at the moment. It is adopted. That's what we have to assess the application against. But we're very conscious that things are moving on. Government standards will be moving on. Our own local standards will be moving on. So we are pushing as much as we can. And as I said, the fact that this is an outline, the fact that we can condition this and approve it at a later date, it actually gives us more time potentially for the local plan to advance, and so we can give those policies in the new local plan more weight at the time that we make that decision. I just wanted to add that. Thank you, Chair.
Does that help, Councillor Bothwell?
It's helpful to know that it's still open to negotiation under the development of the scheme and the development of a new energy strategy for the site. Yeah. But it would be nice if there was an intention and an aim in the current proposal to achieve zero carbon. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to say to the officers, thanks for going away and having a conversation to find out the viability of the site. And regarding my issue, which was, along with many people speaking tonight, was the HD2 wheel, which I spoke about before. And my concern was that, which is, I'm not concerned regarding, I'm concerned we don't get any affordable housing, but we've asked the question. We owe it to make sure that we've gone down every possible route to ensure that, we can find our way to do it. But in this particular case, I understand with the mitigation for Stodmarsh and this, that and the other, the viability of the site becomes significantly difficult. However, on the POS side, and my colleague speaking to the right regarding the energy plan, we've had, where we've come from the last meeting to today, a significant shift forward away from gas boiler. I mean, that's a really good positive. Totally agree with, we've got a climate emergency, but we are where we are right now, looking at this application as it stands and with all the things what are going with it. I'm pleased to see, obviously it's delegated if it gets approved as outlined to officers. I notice in the biodiversity, which is important, that one of the conditions will be a managed biodiversity. There's no point just saying, oh, we'll plant a wildflower meadow and tally ho. You know, that's something that needs to be managed, and you can actually plant biodiversity, good quality in an area, so you can maximise the space of it. So, as an outline application, you know, I know that the officers will work hard to achieve what is needed on that particular plan, and basically ensure that all mitigation is taken and we get the best out of it. It's not an easy scenario. With Stod Marsh, is it going to stay? Is it going to go? I mean, it's difficult, but I think in this particular instance, I don't think any decision will be made, in my personal opinion, regarding any shift away from the Stod Marsh scenario at the moment. So I'd imagine that the mitigation on this site will have to happen in that sense, but that's for another day. But anyway, but thank you for the work coming back with all the information regarding that.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of comments and a question, really. I mean, we can only look at this site on national planning framework policies. You can't, in an ideal world, we'd love solar panels and air conditioning units sorry, not air conditioning, heat source pumps on every house. A couple of things on that. There is an issue with the heat source pumps where they are quite noisy. And if you've got 23 on an estate, this is just the start of it, that eventually those noises will become a noise nuisance. So at some point, this may not actually be the answer. So I don't have the answer to that. But what I'm basically saying is this is coming forward because technically we don't have the local plan in place at the moment. Otherwise, if we had the local plan and we weren't in presumption, and tell me if I'm wrong, we wouldn't have this land come available to allow planning permission on it. We could just refuse it on local plan. The last thing I suppose I want to say, the question was, could someone just explain to me what the filtration system, how that actually works? Does it go through a filtration system and goes into the sewage work so that it mitigates that part of it, or is it somehow treating the sewage works before it goes into the main drains? Thank you, Chair.
I'll come back on the first point around essentially the development potential of the site. So it's allocated for 28 houses within the current local plan. So it would, at some point, you'd anticipate it would come forward. In terms of the treatment of the wastewater, essentially what the applicant has put forward is something called a biological nutrient reactor, which is essentially, it takes the wastewater, it processes the wastewater, it discharges essentially clean water into the adjacent drainage ditch, and then, is a horrible term, but the sludge is then taken away and taken to a wastewater treatment works outside of the catchment. So there are a few hoops, to be honest, for the developer to jump through. It's not a case if they can go and do it tomorrow. Obviously, they've got to do the reserve matters, and then also they've got to go through the environmental permit process as well with the Environment Agency, which is a separate kind of rigorous process that they'll have to pass through. But that's essentially it. That's essentially what's going to happen to the wastewater on the site.
I'll just say thanks. That confirms what I didn't realize it was in the local plan. Thank you.
Do I have any other councillors?
Yes, very briefly. Andrew, could you put the slide up that shows the site with the area beneath it, which has got the SUDS area? If you could find it. It did, then it went. Okay, leaving that. Oh, it's over there. We got it over there. Ah, right. Yes. Could just a comment or a question really. Could we protect that piece of ground? And I take on board the fact that you said that it's got protection because of slow worms, etc. I'm wondering, Fields in Trust, Village Green, I'm just conscious of the fact that, you know, this is an area that will be highly valued by the residents of the new estate and possibly those surrounding it. And I just want to protect it in perpetuity against, you know, I understand the fact we're not going to get the housing that we wanted, but this piece of land, if it ever becomes unnecessary in terms of the need for nutrient neutrality, then I would like this to be part of this development, locked, sealed, stamped, if you will. Is that possible? I know it's possible, but is it likely?
I mean, moving forwards from like a legal agreement perspective, we're obviously looking to lock in that area because it performs a function as part of the Stodmarsh mitigation. And because of that, it has to be carefully managed because they're not just planting the kind of like the wildflower meadow because they want to. There's kind of a function behind it in the sense that it sequesters certain nutrients and things and actually performs like a reducing operation in terms of the Stodmarsh mitigation. In terms of Village Green, that's not necessarily something I can comment on, simply because obviously when I'm looking at this application, we're seeking to ensure its retention for a specific purpose, which is to do with the Stodmarsh mitigation. I couldn't talk about long term, but as I mentioned earlier, there was an appeal which covered, I think it was 7 houses actually on that area, and the inspector threw it out. So there is that kind of material consideration in the background that we would obviously need to look at in future.
Thank you. Does that answer your question?
I just feel that this is a piece of land that is integral to this development. It's necessary now for the mitigation, but that may not be the case in a year's time, 2 years' time, 3 years' time. But I do think it's an integral part of this development and should be protected either by agreement or by legislation. I realise that Village Green is a gold standard, but there are other methods of protecting open land in the development. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So those forms of protection, they can be considered at a later date. This isn't an end point with the application and deciding it, particularly as if the mitigation required is on site, then there will be conditions that protect that area, not just for reptilian habitat, but also there won't be allowed any public access because of its function in mitigating the impacts on Stodmarsh. But again, should the Stodmarsh mitigation tap into a national local solution and that land be no longer required for Stodmarsh mitigation, then an application would be required. Development wouldn't be able to happen without a planning application coming in. So it may be, if we reach that scenario at some point in the future, then it may be possible to consider other forms of protection. But at this time, it's required for Stodmarsh mitigation. There won't be any public access because of that. But who knows what the future holds. But at this moment in time, it's required for Stodmarsh.
Sorry, from what Stevie has just said, is this going to be fenced then? You're telling it's being public will be excluded from this area?
Yeah, that's essentially, but because of the possibility, for instance, of dog walking and things altering the nutrient balance, it's a very kind of delicate balance essentially on this part of the site to achieve the neutrality. It's open space, but it's not necessarily going to be kind of like a recreational open space where people lawfully will be able to kick their balls around and things. That's unfortunately the state of play with the Stodmarsh mitigation, the overall approach that we've had to take to achieve that on an allocated site within the district.
I think that's a very sad state of affairs, to be honest. And I don't think I can support this on that grounds. Thank you.
Councillor.
Yeah, it's actually to carry on about the open space, actually. You says there's going to be an open space contribution. Will that sort of be local or somewhere where these new people, where the new residents could use an open space if they can't use that open space? And then secondly, with regards to the air source heat pumps and the solar panels, I mean, they only work well in conjunction with sort of triple glazing and well insulated homes. So really, rather than that being sort of a reserved matter or a small matter, surely that should all be part of the energy package. I think that was, yeah, that's it. So.
In terms of the energy package, it's perhaps the condition kind of obviously emphasises the point around those particular mitigation elements of the air source heat pumps and things, but it is a fabric first approach that the applicant's intending to take. It's not solely those elements exclusive of anything else. So it's something that we'd look to secure as part of any energy strategy moving forwards, would be kind of a consideration of the fabric of the buildings themselves, not just specifically those elements. And that will develop. Obviously, it's an outline application at the moment, and we'd be seeking to approve the detail over the next kind of 3 years or so. So there is time in between that will allow us to, as Stevie touched on earlier, kind of enforce kind of updated policies that come into play about energy strategies and things. So that's what we're looking to do on that front. I'm sorry, the open space question's gone up my...
It was the open space contribution, I think it was
yeah.
there somewhere. Yeah, just, is there like a place that you have for it? You know, if you're saying it's being fenced off now, is that the whole area is being fenced off, all that land, or just by the neutrality bit?
No, so it's that area. So that area does form part of the Stod Marsh mitigation. Ordinarily, we would obviously be getting an open space off-site contribution. But because this development is unviable, that obviously that's thrown out the equation. So not only is the affordable housing challenge, but the open space too, because of the Stod Marsh issues. One thing obviously this development would provide is seal receipts. So it's not just a case of no money for any services comes forward as part of this development. There would be, we're looking around £385,000 towards community infrastructure levy, and a portion of that does get allocated to the parish council themselves. So the parish can, I think it's like 15%, the parish council would be able to use that towards kind of projects within their area, and that isn't specifically restricted to any type of project. It's projects that the parish feel kind of are necessary in their patch.
Just on that, so that say 15% or whatever it is that in advance, or is that in stages, or is that all just a decision that's made at a later date?
So typically the seal comes into, essentially we seek the seal contributions prior to commencement of a development, so they shouldn't usually start until they've paid that, and kind of like an instalment approach can be taken to that. But it just depends on, at the time, kind of how many they've come in for reserve matters for, because it could be that, you know, they come in phases or something. So, but that's what we're looking at for this site.
Sorry, is that answering your question, Councillor Barnes? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yeah, having gathered my thoughts on this, I just want to kind of raise a few points. So I echo what other councillors have said about the disappointment about no affordable housing. And while I do also recognise the reasons for it, I just don't think it's something I can move past. I don't think it's something I can stomach, to be honest. No affordable housing on the site. Especially when, you know, we need to have a strategy to deal with homelessness and rough sleeping. We need to get more people on the housing ladder, especially when so many young people have had the dream of home ownership ripped from them. So I'm not sure that's something I can look past, to be honest, despite the reasons. And also, I mean, I saw in the agenda as well that there would be no funding because of the costs for open space contributions. And at first, that was something I was willing to look past, because I considered the southern part, where the nutrient neutrality thing would be, there would be the meadows and the trees and the scrubs. but now we learn that they're going to be fenced off and separated. I find that a little bit harder to accept. It does, like, I have seen in the agenda that it does say that there's the strategies for if it changes, then you'll claw back the money for the affordable housing and the open spaces. But that just seems to me like ifs and buts, but candy and nuts, you know, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. There's no guarantee that we'd have these things. And it just seems like the applicant has put in the application for this development without knowing they'd be able to afford these very important things. On that grounds, I don't think I can support this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to really reiterate what Councillor Mackenzie had said, I think in terms of the affordable housing, you know, right now we are in a housing crisis with a lot of young people, but, you know, for 2 generations now, really struggling to get on the housing market. And what I'm concerned about here is that as a council, we're sending a message that actually you don't, for as long as you have special circumstances, you don't have to get to that 30%. And I think right now with this housing crisis going on, we need to be really firm on that 30%. And as Harry said, there's a lot of ifs and buts of what could potentially come forward, but what we have to deal with is the here and now. And the here and now is telling me this is not a proposal that I can support. Thank you.
Any further contributions? Perhaps we can move to a vote on this one. We need a motion, we do, don't we? Indeed. Is someone prepared to support this motion? Did you want to? No, it wasn't the question. I'm asking for a support of the motion. No, that's fine. We have. Does someone wish to put forward an alternative motion in that case, then, given that we have? Councillor Stockwell?
As I said in the very beginning, I welcome the efforts that have been made by the developer in as much as the climate change initiatives that have gone into this. I personally feel, as I think the committee feels, the loss, just to recap, no money, no open space, and no housing. So, you know, this development, while it might be great for the landowner and the developers, and possibly for the people moving in, it does nothing for the district. So I do think we need to look again. I personally probably could support this if the open space that is going to be available, i.e. people can look at it, it's going to need razor fencing to keep people out of it, to be honest. It's not going to work unless you've got military grade fencing. You know, people are going to want to walk their dogs there. It's an open space. So I can't support this as it stands. I feel very disappointed that I can't support it because it's moving in the right direction, but we just haven't got there with this. I propose that again, we send it back to be looked at again because I don't think it's there. I really am disappointed. I'd like to be able to support it, but I don't think it does anything for our district.
Chair.
Just to make clear, I would like to suggest that it's deferred.
Sorry, Chair. So yeah, just to confirm, deferment to confirm with the applicant about the southern portion and how much of that is required to be used for Stod Marsh mitigation and what could potentially be released for open spaces. Is that, in general terms, what you're looking to defer the item for?
Yeah, that would be a great deal of help to me personally. I don't know what the rest of the committee feel on that.
I think I was minded to support this before this evening, but having heard what I've heard on open space this evening, I would also be in support of a deferment, because for me that is too important, and decisions like this involve trade-offs, and unfortunately I couldn't support this without an assurance that open space is accessible. Thank you, Chair.
So I'll take that as your seconding, Councillor Prentice. Thank you.
I was just going to ask if there's a time limit before they go into the inspectorate, for instance. I don't know when the cut-off point is. You keep deferring it. There must be some time scale. Thank you.
Yes, just to confirm, yeah, there is the possibility of an appeal against non-determination. So yeah, that is a risk.
Are we okay to go?
Sorry, Chair. Are you saying we are, or
It's a risk.
Yes, there is the ability
so
for
the
the
time
applicant.
scale is the time scale is running out for non-determination, or when is that time scale?
At this moment in time, there is the ability to appeal against non-determination.
Okay, I'll leave it to them then. Thank you.
Okay, are we ready for a vote on this one then? We have a motion and second. Yep. So
Sorry, again, Chair, can you confirm what we're voting on?
we have a proposal to defer this pending investigation on the use of the green area for accessibility for some of the housing, a portion of the green area, I believe, and seconded by Councillor Prentice. Yes, correct.
Yep, the vote should be ready now. And that has been carried with 12 for, none against and 1 abstain.
Thank you. Very long debate. Moving on to the next item, number 7. It's Canterbury Care Home, land at Cockring Road, Fannington Without. If I could ask Kelly Tonkin to introduce it. Thank you, Kelly.
Good evening, members. Good evening, Chair. This application is for the installation of a flue on Canterbury Care Home along Cockring Road in Fannington. Members will be aware that this application was brought to Planning Committee in May this year. The application was deferred for officers to consider the visual impact of the flue and to provide measures to reduce its visibility, along with providing CGI images of the flue. Following this, plans were provided and CGIs were also submitted, and I'll show these in the later slides. Since the report was published, Fannington Parish Council have provided some comments offering their support for the revised proposal and stating that they are happy with the revised design, and so are residents. As you can see from these elevational drawings here, the top image shows the proposed front elevation, which is the northern elevation, which is the current revised scheme, and then the below elevation shows the previously design that was brought to Planning Committee in May. As you can see, the proposed flue has been revised. Previously, the flue ran horizontally along the roof of the roof slope and then terminated vertically, and now it's just coming vertically within the roof slope with all the extract systems set within the envelope of the building. Just for context, here is a photograph from Manners Close, which is opposite the application site, which shows what's currently in situ, which is the unlawful flue that has been put on the roof at the current stage. And that's just showing an arrow from where I'm stood for context. And then this is the CGI image showing the revised scheme of the flue from the front elevation from Manners Close. And then this is the proposed side elevation from which you see from Cochrane Road itself. So the top image elevation shows the revised scheme, and then the below image shows what was previously brought to planning committee in May. As you can see, the height of the flue had been reduced, reducing that visual impact. And then again, here is a CGI image showing that elevation for the revised design. Arrows kind of pointing to where the flue would be. And then this photograph is, for context, showing a public right-of-way which runs along Farbras Way, which on the map shows from here it's to the east of the site, but it also kind of wraps around to the rear. And that's the view you can achieve at the moment of the flue that's in situ. And then this is a CGI image showing what the proposed flue would look like from the rear elevation. So as you can see, the flue has been revised significantly, reducing that kind of horizontal flue extract, and now only visible point is the flue that's along the roof slope. Just like to draw members' attention to the condition that's been placed on the application. Typically, we would put a condition on for timing for 3 years. However, given that there is a unlawful flue in situ, we have revised this so that it has to be implemented within 1 year of the date of permission. And there is also a planning condition which states that the flue should be in a dark grey, which is matching the roof slope of the building to kind of reduce that, minimise that visual impact. Subject to the recommendation is approval, set out in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I don't believe we have any public speakers for this one, so can I move that we grant this one as per Kelly's recommendation, subject to safeguard conditions. Do I have a seconder?
Second that, please, Chair.
I can now open it for debate.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, I'm just very pleased to see that the applicant has taken this away and worked with the officers on a much more suitable and aesthetically pleasing, less industrial looking flue. And I don't represent the residents nearby, but I understand that residents nearby are happier with the proposed design. And if they're happier, I think this committee should be happy too.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I actually took a walk round to go see it yesterday, and the one that's there at the moment is, I will agree, having seen it with my own eyes now, extremely large, visible and ugly. And I wouldn't be happy if I was living opposite it either. Sorry? That is the one. That's exactly what I went to see, yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm very happy that it will now be shrunk in size, and yeah, I think the proposed amendments are very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other contributions? If we could perhaps move to a vote then.
Sorry, we had a seconder for that one. Who was the seconder? Stockley, thank you. Okay, that should be ready now. And that has carried with 13-4.
Thank you very much. Moving on to the number 8, 14 Rose Lane, Canterbury. And if I could ask Ashley to introduce the one, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members. So this application relates to 14 Rose Lane in Canterbury City Centre, which falls also within Canterbury City's Canterbury City Conservation Area. Sorry. The application is for advertising consent for 1 non-illuminated fascia sign, 2 digital information screens and vinyl stickering to the front door, and forms part of a council project to relocate from its current site at Military Road to the city centre. So you can see for context the location. And then this is the existing front elevation. And then these are the CGI images of the proposed advertising. So the sign, the fascia sign would be non-illuminated and constructed of individually cut metal lettering with a logo. The proposed sign would be similar to one which already exists on an adjoining unit and is considered acceptable given that the site is located in a modern part of the city centre, and as such, it's considered that the proposed sign would not dominate or conflict with the building or be out of character with the area. And just for a bit of context, you can see the adjoining unit there with similar sort of signage. So therefore, the application is considered to preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area and is recommended for approval subject to safeguarding conditions. Thank you.
Can I propose that we grant this one subject to the safeguarding conditions? Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Jones. Do we have any comments or contributions for this one?
Seems like a fairly standard proposal to me. I mean, it doesn't really seem out of the ordinary or in need of debate. Thank you.
Well, assuming you're not speaking for all, Councillor Smith, did you wish to say something?
Do we have a pecuniary interest in this? Because it is Canterbury City Council.
Yes, that's the only reason why it's been brought to committee, because it's the council development. So yeah.
If everyone's happy, I'll move to a vote. And thank you.
The vote should be ready now. And that's unanimous with 13-4.
Thank you very much, everyone. And moving forward now to item number 9, the 1 to 3 Whitefriars Street, Canterbury, are very similar setup, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this application relates to 1 to 3 Whitefriars, which again is part of the same council project to relocate to the city centre. The proposal is for an LCD information screen, a non-illuminated poster board on the front elevation windows with vinyl stickers to the entrance door. Just for context again, there's the location and this is the existing front elevation. The context of the application site is commercial in nature, with the street scene being characterised by a number of fascia and hanging signs of varying sizes and materials. The proposed LCD information screen poster board, along with the vinyl stickers, are considered to be acceptable given their scale and the context of the site, and would not dominate or conflict with the building or be out of character with the area. And this is just a CGI of the proposals. And again, therefore, given the context of the site, the application is considered to preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area and is recommended for approval subject to safeguarding conditions. Thank you.
Can I propose that we grant this one subject to safeguarding conditions? Thank you. For a seconder. Thank you. And if anyone has any comments? No? Shall we move straight to a vote?
Okay, that vote should be ready for you now. And that is unanimous with 13-4.
Thank you, Rachel. And we'll now move forward to Planning Appeals Report. Any?
Thank you. The summaries are fairly self-explanatory, but I just wanted to draw members' attention to 87 Canterbury Road in the appeal summary there. There's an error in the final sentence. The appeal was dismissed, so it wasn't approved. So just to confirm that it was dismissed. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, if you're looking, it's on page 68. See you rummaging over there. Can I ask if there is any urgent business to be dealt with in public? I think there's none advised, but we can just move. That's correct. And item 12, exclusion of the press and public, not required, I believe. And any other business which falls under the exempt provisions? I've got none advised, but Councillor Stockwell.
More in terms of any other business, just a reminder that if just a general reminder, if you're seconding something, if you use a microphone, otherwise the recording is somewhat null and void. You know, it makes life a lot easier for anyone listening to the recording if you're seconding something, just to say so. Thank you.
Your point is well noted, Councillor Stockley. Thank you. Was there, did you wish to clarify the one with the secondary one? Okay, just to confirm then that there's no other business and the date of the next meeting is the 17th of October 2023. So if that's, I shall finish the meeting. Thank you. Thank you.